So welcome everyone to today's session on conversion-driven packaging. And we're going to be doing live audits of packaging design for CPG brands. I'm super excited today to have you all listening in. And this is meant to be super actionable and educational. So you're going to walk away with tips to help your business. For today, I've invited on Sanders with NUEX Creative, which is a packaging or design agency, and they also focus and specializing in CPG, branding, packaging design. And so really an expert at understanding how to create packaging that actually sells off the shelf, whether that's physical or digital. As I mentioned, we'll be doing a quick overview just of packaging design and things to know, and then we'll jump into audits towards the end as well. So I'd like to invite up Sanders. Sanders, welcome today. I'd love for you to just give a quick intro. You can jump into the presentation as well, and walk through some of your key tenets around packaging design.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Sanders. I'm the founder of NUEX Creative. We help create branding and packaging for consumer packaged goods companies like yourself. So I'm really excited to be here. Really appreciate all of you guys joining, especially all the participants that shared some packaging to review at the end of the call. So I'm really excited about that. So let me jump into my deck. And we'll be going through this fairly fast. I try to be as detailed as possible for everything, but at the same time, it's limited on time, so I didn't go as depth as I would love to. Maybe we could do another session. And at the end of this, we will be doing the live review of the packaging as well, as you mentioned, which I'm really excited. So today we're going to be talking about conversion-driven packaging and how to boost sales specifically through packaging design itself. I'm the founder of NUEX Creative. As I mentioned, we design winning brands and conversion-driven packaging. We've helped a lot of brands go from 0 to over 100 million through branding and mostly through packaging design. So we've created some really exciting brands across all sectors of the CPG market. We also help with marketing material and go-to-launch strategy. At the end of this, if you for whatever reason you're shy and did not share your packaging, feel free to go to nuexcreative.com/foodbevy. We're going to be giving 30% off first projects to everyone on the call. And we'll also give additional free brand audit one-on-one as well for anyone who's a little shy. So today we'll be talking about the introduction and the importance of packaging, some common myths that people don't realize about packaging, consumer psychology and the design principles, some case studies from top brands, and then some practical steps to help you create winning packaging. And then at the end, we're beginning the Q&A packaging review. So 72% of consumers actually say that packaging design does influence their purchasing decisions. So it is very important. And this is why packaging matters. It is your first impression. It is your differentiation against the market. It's also a good way to tell your brand narrative, tell your story at a glance. Especially for smaller companies, you're not able to put a lot of money into brand awareness and some marketing. And so when they look at your packaging on the shelf and in person, that's actually the chance for you to tell your story, talk about your product, especially if they're not able to demo your product. That's where you're able to talk about your competitive advantage, stand out from the crowd, and it is a repeatable science. So once you get this correctly right, you can expand your lines or even create new brands into new markets and expand your brand on a repeatable science for increasing your sales. So as you've all seen, I think old brands are kind of starting to die out. Wonder Bread and some of the old packaging is really being replaced by newer designs. And it's not that the products are always 100% better. A lot of times it's the packaging. And that's the first thing you see at the store. A really good case point is wine companies. When you're discovering a new wine, first thing you're looking at is the label. And so that does actually matter. And customers want new. Even Campbell's, as long as it's stayed in business, has started changing the strategy of what sells, showing more of the tasty food. And a lot of brands are coming in and actually taking up a lot of that market share, right? Like Welly is a great example of that. He came in and that company wanted to target, basically just redesign Band-Aids It's not necessarily anything new. It's just different packaging, and they've done it really well. I believe they also own Ollie, and they did that for the vitamin world as well. So let's go over some common myths. So a few common myths is that it's just about making the product look good or the packaging look pretty. That's actually not true. There's key information that differentiates you from the competition to help you stand out. There's key information you need to put to actually create those conversions, create brand awareness. Second common myth is that products just sell themselves and the packaging doesn't matter. That's not true. Better designs always win. That's actually a very common mistake, is that if you don't understand your market or where you fit into the market, sometimes you can actually design things that are too minimalistic and too luxurious. And that can actually decrease your sales if you don't have enough information on the packaging itself. Um, and then all you need is a logo on the packaging. That works if you have billions of dollars for brand awareness. For most brands, that's actually not true. You are going to have some secondary and some key information to make those sales. And then packaging sustainability isn't a priority with the new customers out there, especially Gen Z. Sustainability is actually a growing concern and a growing importance. And so Tropicana is actually a great example of all of these myths. They rebranded and did a more modern looking design and more minimalistic, thinking that better design would actually help increase their sales. What happened is they actually lost $30 million because of a lack of design strategy. And they actually had to revert back to the original packaging. And if you go to the stores now, all they did was change the shape of the bottle of the package and basically kept their original packaging design. So that's a really good case, because what they did is they tried to design something that just looked better, but they didn't take into account the target audience or the market. They didn't make it look juicier, which is what consumers are actually looking for. They decreased their branding, where it's on the side, it's vertical, it's actually hard to read. So they actually lowered their brand awareness, their brand importance, their tastiness, and basically went against their strategy. Um,
What I'll
Olipop,
explain
on
to
the
you
other
about the
hand.
Tropicana example is understand like how people are shopping the category probably, because I bet 95% of the people who buy Tropicana are doing it on autopilot. And
Yeah.
like if you make them like stop and think like, wait, is this the orange juice that I buy every day or not? That's an extra decision that they probably don't want to have to make, and they might second guess themselves.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Inversely, Olipop rebrand actually got them to $500 million, and now they're doing really, really well because of the rebranding. Before they were ignored, and now they're doing really well because the hierarchy is there. It looks tastier, has a better brand experience. Consumer psychology and design principles. So with everything, you wanted to analyze all aspects of the brand psychology for consumers. There's color psychology. I'm sure you guys are kind of familiar with this and how brands select their colors. But it's not just for branding itself. You have to actually take that into account for packaging, right? So if you're trying to build something for urgency, you can go with red, like Coca-Cola. If you're trying to build trust, people usually go with like blues. Green is actually one of the most important, especially for food and beverage, because it's going to look all natural. And so if you want to make a product look more natural than it is, or leverage that a little bit further, like Whole Foods, for example, they went green for a reason, to show and convey that they're more organic, and then yellow optimism. And you can use that for the branding, for the logo, for the color type, but you can also incorporate that strategy into packaging or even flavors. Topography and hierarchy is really important as well. Everything needs to be clear, needs to be readable, needs to be legible. You have to have a clear visual hierarchy. The visual imagery and brand cues need to be on point. And then also you're going to have to look into material and sustainability. Look at the five senses, how things touch, what the experience is. It's not just about the look of the package. In custom packaging designs like we did for Shant, for example, where the custom bottle, a very clean visual hierarchy, can have a really positive impact on your consumers. So some case studies from some top brands that we're all familiar with. Apple does a really good job of focusing on minimalism and premium packaging design. This works if you're able to still afford some of the brand awareness. So for like smaller brands, more food and beverage might not be as applicable, but at the same time, they also did focus really heavily on a unique unboxing experience, which we'll go into a little bit later. But that's equally as important as the packaging itself, of all the little minute details that go into a product. Coca-Cola, we all know that. That is the epitome of brand awareness with just their logo and just their name. Again, it's a very expensive approach, but one key takeaway of that is that they're telling you that their logo and their brand is the most important thing about that product. One of the biggest mistakes that I see small companies do is that they actually don't put enough emphasis on the brand. They think, hey, no one knows who I am, so my logo stays really small. And it's usually the opposite of what you want to do. If you want to get more attention to your brand a little bit early, you need to give attention to your logo. You need to call it to attention. You need to say, hey, this is important. You need to look at us. You have to demand respect by the customers, even if you're not well known yet. Lush is a really good example of sustainability. They needed to create packaging that reinforced that sustainability, and with Gen Z and people that care a little bit more about that, they were able to align that really well and grow a brand that it becomes almost synonymous with that. So we'll go with some proven tactics to design winning in packaging design. If you work with us, we start off with a kickoff call. We do a brain trust, which is a strategy designed by Apple. I mean, sorry, by Pixar, adopted by Apple, and are the large companies. And in the brain trust, we go in to identify what questions we're trying to solve, and then create strategies, the solutions for that. And we're going to go over that a little bit of that strategy here on this call. First step is actually breaking apart the components of packaging, structure, shape, materials, brand, visual identity. There's a lot of components that go into packaging, as you guys all know, but don't overlook any small aspect of that. So, for example, the materials alone, Pringles did a really good job of designing a product that had a unique shape for stacking, but it also made a unique crunch sound. No matter where you bite the chip, it creates a pop sound. Coca-Cola does the same thing with sizzling when they do the commercials before you go into the movies. They have that sizzle, it becomes a synonymous. So also think about your other senses. Think about the touch, the sound, and trying to attack all five senses when you're creating packaging design, not just the design itself. So with everything, you want to start with the target audience. Biggest problem I think with any company, even whether it's design packaging or not, is we try to solution things too quickly. We look at a product and we say, this is a really good product. Let's just go to market. Let's try to find a way to sell this product. But you have to start with the target audience first, understand what their needs are, understand what their wants are, their preferences. And then you can go into market research. You have to also understand what the market is doing, especially when it comes to what information you're going to put in your packaging design, right? There's a lot of package information that you can put, but you need to understand what the competition is doing, how to stand out from the competition, almost like you're educating them. So, Poppy did a really good job. Poppy was actually, I think, recently just purchased, I believe, by Pepsi. And they did a phenomenal job, right?
$1 billion.
Yeah, exactly. And they really kind of even started this whole trend. And one thing they focused on is, 5 grams of sugar. They did a really quick call out. If you look at their focal point here, they called that out because they knew that was the differentiator against the soda companies that were doing like 45 grams of sugar, right? And then if you look at the visual hierarchy, it's very simple. You get the logo, 5 grams of sugar, and the Coca-Cola. And all of this is really neat, but it's actually secondary. So from a distance, this is what your eye catches. Um, so if you look at Olipop, for example, really large branding of the flavor and the flavor icon. Those are the three things that you see. All of this other information is super important for conversions, but it's secondary. It's not what you see from a distance. A good way of testing this is when you go to supermarkets, or whether you're looking at your designs online, whatever it is, look at it from a distance so that you can kind of quickly see what are the 3 to 5 things that your eye catches right away. We did that similar strategy for Zaps. So with this client, they actually wanted a lot of information. It was almost information overload. Uh, but to compete with the competition, all the competitors had a lot of information. And so we had to identify what information to put. We try to make this very secondary, and you can do that through secondary colors. Um, and there's some key points of eye tracking that we kind of build this in. Um, and so one way to do this on packaging is to actually blur it. So if you kind of squint your eyes, you can blur packaging and with anything design, and you're actually able to see what the eye catches on almost your peripherals, right? So one thing is you have to have a directional line for your information, something that goes into a circle or is organized in a certain fashion. So for this, if you like squint, you're able to see like the green blocks become 3 focal points, and you can kind of create a narrative with that, if that makes sense. So you can do that with all of your packaging to identify what are the key portions, and then what are you putting as your secondary information. Um, and then the branding, the boxing experience is also really important, right? What the experience is using your product. We like to always put little hidden messages, kind of like Snapple. Snapple, when you open it up, they have the fun facts that are inside. So also think about what you can put with your packaging to kind of build that unique experience that people will talk about. Because it's not just about purchasing; you want them to enjoy it, and that's how you're gonna create that loyalty, right? The same with storytelling, and just make sure to test and iterate everything, because you don't want to end up like Tropicana. But Tropicana made that decision; it didn't revert back. They would have continued losing more than $30 million. Um, so that's also super important. Um, Another thing to look at is the customer journey. So I kind of created an acronym to kind of remember this. It's a work in progress. I'm sure I'll change it in the future, but for now it's EPCOT. So it's not just about the packaging. You need to know what is the entire purchase experience for a customer, whether that's online or in stores. You need to know what the entire journey. So if you're walking into a store or online, you need to know what kind of real estate you're working with, what kind of stores, displays, how are other people uh, competing with you. For example, if we walk into a store, you need to know if there's a billboard nearby that you can advertise that billboard, or flyers on the store before you go in. What does the shelf look like? Um, this is also a really good example of kind of peripheral selling. If you are able to block off larger sections in certain colors, then your eye will catch that in the peripherals. So you'll see almost a wall of green, and that's how Tom's is able to get a little more attention than the ones up here, for example. Um, this is another great example of peripheral selling. Is if imagine you're walking through a store, um, and there's all these mac and cheeses, which one's going to grab your attention, right? The Bonza did a really good job of having it all orange, and so when you're walking, this is actually going to probably catch your eye faster than anything else. And so you really want to have designs that can do that, and you can do that through different ways. They did color blocking, right? It's just one color. Um, the same with Tom's, they did one color, so it kind of grabs your attention and takes up a little bit more shelf space. But there's other ways you can do it. You can have contrast within your design. That does a really good job of grabbing attention. There can also be certain elements on the design that can grab your attention as well. And another thing is the consistency of the branding. So if you look at Goodles, it's a little dark in this photo, but they have the consistent logo across. So even though they might not grab as much attention there, they do the consistency with their branding does a pretty good job of also still trying to grab your attention as well.
But
But
what
once
I do want to call out to you, just kind of interesting because I experienced this with my brand, is make sure you put your products on the shelf because there's physical realities. So like shadows from the shelf, like the Googles is actually hard to see from this photo because the name is in the upper third and the shadow from the shelf overlays it. That happened with my brand T Squares, and so you can't read it. But if you see Bonza, even that product in the middle that's all the way in the back, you can clearly read the brand because the name takes up the entire vertical length, versus so it won't get lost in the shadow. So there's even like physical realities to pay attention to.
hmm Yeah, and that goes back to know the environment, right? Because you have to see if it's online, you have to see how it's displayed on online. And if you're in a store, you need to see exactly how it's displayed. If you don't know what the environment is like, then you really don't know how to leverage or maximize either the packaging design itself or the marketing material to help support that. Um, and then, so after you've had their attention through peripheral selling, you're going to go into comparison mode, right? You have to identify now that maybe you've stopped their tracks and they're looking at the shelf, whether that's online or in store. The buyer is now going to go in comparison mode. You've grabbed their attention, they've stopped. They have to decide. You have to help them decide why are they going to pick up your packaging versus the competitors. Is there a certain thing on the design that grabs their attention? Is there certain information, right? Is like for Poppy, for example, it had 5 grams of sugar. You might pick up by the selling points. If there's a bunch of competitor drinks, you might pick up one that says 5 grams of sugar versus 45 grams of sugar. There might be the flavor might grab their attention. So you have to look at the visual hierarchy and figure out exactly how you're going to grab their attention, but you have to look at the competition to be able to do that first. Because, for example, if Back to Nature did their boxes in white, they would just blend in with the competition, right? Instead, they picked a lot of different vibrant colors to look more modern than the competition and also grab their attention away from the competition. So definitely know the environment and figure out how to compete on the comparison level. And then the O is for on the packaging design. So on the packaging design itself is when once you've compared it, they're going to pick it up. And now that's the make or break. That's the go to end sale, right? What information you put on the packaging, whether it's primary or secondary, is going to make the decision of why they purchase yours versus the competitors. So if you look at Goodles, for example, I'm just gonna choose them again because these are all real world examples. I went through the stores just to get real examples for you guys. Um, if you look at theirs, they have 14 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber. There's no selling point on the competition of 365 that really competes with that, right? You know from looking at this, it's gluten free. This one actually kind of gets lost. You don't know of any of the macros. There is a gluten free at the bottom, but between the two, I would say that the high majority of us would probably purchase this one over that one, um, just from just from the information that they put on the packaging. And there's ways that you can do that it doesn't break the design. Sometimes you do have to break the design, like Poppy having the little circle. That technically breaks the design, but sometimes that will increase your conversions. But if you do, colors, then you can also make that information almost secondary. So for example, on this one, um, the nutritional information is kind of blended in the monochromatic color scheme of the Goodles box. And so it's actually somewhat secondary. From a distance, you're probably not going to see that. You're going to see more of the yellow items. You're going to see the gluten-free. You're going to see the Goodles. You're going to grab it, and then you're going to see the secondary information. But that secondary information is still going to probably convert the customer to purchase your product over the competition. And then the last is the transaction experience. So the post-purchase experience is just as important as the purchasing experience. That's actually how you make loyal customers. So one, have a really good product that helps. But two, in the packaging design itself, you can do hidden messages like I mentioned, or like Snapples or the unboxing experience. You can do things. You can even have language on the box that has a story about your brand. There was a brand, I don't remember the example right now, but on the back of it, they actually told about how their family started it. And they did it in such a unique way that, like, I even shared the package with my girlfriend, and she was reading it and thought it was really neat. So you can make a personal connection with the consumer through the narrative that you put literally even on the back of a box, for example, and that can build loyalty. So some rules for winning brands is kind of an overview again, is you need to have bold branding. Smaller brands usually have smaller logos. Large brands have larger logos for a reason. They want to be very bold that their brand is important and it demands attention. You also want to have key information on the packaging, whether that's like the milligram count, whether that's, vegan, gluten-free, the flavors. And you're gonna have to figure that out based on what the competition is doing and what your audience is also looking for. You need to have a clear visual hierarchy. And again, one of the best ways to do this is step away from your packaging. Everyone looks up close to your packaging in detail, but step away and you can see like the focal point from a distance is, the logo, parts of the design. You can see there's a circle here for the, 4 grams of sugar. That makes you kind of question, hey, maybe I should look at that information. And then also you want to they have quality designs. Everything is more modern, and they also have unique and good brand experiences, right? Unique textures, unique styles. And we're in an amazing renaissance where all of these new brands that are coming in and starting to dominate and retake and reclaim the market are using modern designs to do that. Um, and
Taylor,
so,
should we switch over to audit soon? We have about 30 minutes left.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. But yeah, the takeaway is it's a repeatable science. And like I always say, um, uh, our brokers just lie and say that art is subjective to sell bananas taped to a wall. It was once sold for several $1 million. But it is repeatable science. So, yep. Yeah, let me switch over to you. You want to pull up
So
like
yeah, I think that was a really great just overview of everything that brands need to know. So in going over to the audits, thanks for those who put their information in the chat. We'll start from those who are here and listed. I think as we go through, I'll invite you up when I call you up. If you're able to come on camera, we'll have about 5 to 8 minutes per person to have theirs reviewed. So why don't we start? I think Ruth checked in first with let me pull up her site as well with Rudy's Pickles. Sanders, do you have that one up? If not, I can
Yeah,
share.
I do. Let me pull that up really quick.
Okay. Hey Ruth, good to see you. Well, Sanders is pulling that out. Tell us what's working well with your packaging and what challenges do you suspect you might have?
Um, so I think that by and large the packaging is pretty good. It's clear. I call out on the front what kind of pickles they are because these pickles are not regular go-to-market pickles. They're a sweet hot garlic pickle that are hand cut. It's my mom's recipe, etc. But when people
Hmm.
see pickles and even though pickles may taste differently, they oftentimes look the same. So it's called out on there what they are. So if you see right above the logo, it says sweet hot garlic,
Hmm.
and it's pretty obvious that that's what it is. You can see the logo. It's colorful. There's enough white space. All the things that are required by law to be on the packaging, they
Hmm.
are there. Things like an allergen statement, ingredient list, nutrition panel, where they're processed, my information, etc. So it's all there. It's a little bit unusual in that it is a special dye, not that one right there, but you can see for the most part because of when you pull it up as a food service, but you can see that there's a special die cut, so it's not. There's a little bit um, of a unique shape there.
So then, Ruth, and then you have the larger ones are sold in food service, and then the
Right.
smaller pints would be sold at farmers markets or in grocery store.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
perfect. I think that's good. Sanders, any other questions? You want to give some initial thoughts?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, thank you for having me, Ruth. So first, I love pickles, so I'll definitely have to check this out. So there's a couple of things with this. So the sweet hot garlic, it kind of competes with the flavors that you have below. And so from consumer stance, I think it might be a little bit confusing. The other thing too is that if we want to give our brand more of a presence and more of an importance and then one thing to do is kind of follow the American flag philosophy. So, in America, you cannot have any flag raised on a pole higher than the United States flag. And we do that to say like nothing is above that except for God, right?
Mhm.
So kind of follow that philosophy with your logo as well. If you have the logo, most top brands, what they do is a lot of times you can have the logo above everything else, nothing else above it. And then it demands that, hey, this is the most important thing. And I think that kind of might help as well versus like having the sweet hot garlic above it. You might have that maybe below the logo. But I also think they do compete because like at first glance, it might be a little confusing if if it's a sweet hot garlic is the flavor or if the spicy is the flavor, for example. So that's one thing that I would do. I think the logo definitely looks all natural and it looks good. On the white label, it might seem a little cheap, like maybe like farmers market, like printed on home. So one way to get around that is maybe to add color to your label. And and if you want white around it, you can also do that by creating contrast. So there might be a portion of the label that you do have white for the logo, and then maybe you have like a colored section for the label itself, or even calling out like the flavor. Um, there's a few that's a few things that I would do.
So, just another couple of things to mention is, and you probably can't see it in this picture, but I also have, in addition to a logo, I have a little character, supposed to
Okay.
be.
Oh, that is over here.
And so there's a little character on there, and she's on other parts of the website as well. But she says my pickles are a really big deal, and then
A little food pun.
yeah, and my little signature, supposedly my signature. So, gives a little bit something for the buying experience. Um,
I love that. Yeah.
but what you're saying really makes sense with some feedback that I've gotten because oftentimes, so on my pickles, there's a spicy and there's an original and there's a relish. So
Mhm.
spicy, I put in red, original, I put in blue, and relish, I put in green. Um, I do sometimes have retailers and even retailers that have worked with me for a while that say, I don't know what kind these are. I just see sweet hot garlic. So what you're saying is totally on point. And I have to tell them, I'll look down there and you'll see spicy, it's in red. And, obviously when I designed this, I thought that that would work, but you're bringing it up now indicates to me that probably it needs some tweaking there.
Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
happy with putting those together, right? Because I think you're right. Like sweet hot garlic is so vivid of a flavor cue that
Mhm.
original and spicy don't necessarily add. Because you have hot and
Right.
white. A lot of people hot is already spicy, so you want to make sure
Right.
that
Right.
those are differentiated. Okay, perfect. Love
Yeah,
that.
that's also it's also
But
big as the coloring, right? So this is the only thing that's really in black at that boldness, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the color here. And because of that offset, you're actually drawing more attention inadvertently to the sweet hot garlic than is intended. So you can use a thinner font, maybe secondary, have it below the description. What I would do is separate. You want to have everything designed as a narrative and directional lines. So I would separate it out and have like the logo more top point. And you can still have that maybe in white or in contrast. And then I would have, one way to do this is actually have a large strip in red that actually says spicy so that they know. And then the next one could be like green, and the next one could be like all natural, could be whatever color. And then that way they're able to quickly see, okay, brand, flavor, because you want a 3-second read with anything in marketing, and that includes your packaging design. From within 3 seconds, I should be able to look at it and say, okay, cool, these are pickles. What type of pickles are these? What flavor is this? And then they're able to pick and quickly grab which flavor. So if they're able to know instantly which flavor they're picking up, even if they're looking at your brand and they purchased it, that's a good tell sign that the hierarchy is a little off on this.
perfect. Thanks so much for
Um,
thanks, Sanders.
ask a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
So that is one thing that I've been focusing on lately. I'm going through an accelerator program as well. And one of the things that we talked about earlier this week was, does your packaging tell a story? Well, my market story is very important to the pickles. This is my mother's pickle recipe. So really, if you look on the packaging, I mean, it's all over my website, but if you look on the packaging, it's not there. And the challenge I face that probably everybody faces is how do you get all this stuff on the label, in the required size, et cetera. And it's hard to tell the whole story. So I wondered, should I put some kind of little bling out there that says mom's recipe or I don't know.
Yeah, so where you have this illustration on the side, that's fantastic. That's how you build a loyalties, have that narrative and that experience that they don't expect. You have enough real estate from what I'm seeing is on that side panel where you have that, have underneath or on top. But since you put mother's recipe, I would actually almost have that small either as part of the logo in kind of place of that or even underneath and you can add that in either as part of the branding from initially, or you can add that in part of the narrative on the backside. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, and then the other thing to Roots, I know there's probably a lot of things. Sanders is also open to kind of talking more in depth for your brand as well, so you can also schedule a time to ask more questions too. Perfect. So next up we have Ruth from Stella Spices. Ruth, are you able to come on? And then what I'd like for you to share is, or sorry, not, sorry, I said Ruth.
Candace.
Candace, I apologize.
Hi.
Candace, if you can share a little bit about what's working well for your spices and your packaging and a problem that you have.
Sure. And just to say, Anthony is my Anthony and I are both here from Stella, so he's on the call as well.
Hi, Anthony.
How you doing?
So maybe we get some good. We're selling primarily online, and we're getting some positive feedback on the colors. I can already tell the logo is not big enough. I guess maybe and one thing that I would say is we have our bottles. And then we have what we call our minis. And one of the challenges that we face is kind of communicating that these are small, 2 to 3 portion packages, which I know on our website it's a little bit hard to show. But we have bottles, these minis, which we sell also in pouches as collections. And then we have like our boxed collections, the grilling. And what we're seeing is that we're getting a lot of interest, but we're struggling to convert.
Yeah. So there's a few things. So one, the package is actually in the right direction. It's some really cool stuff.
Sanders, do you want to share your screen again?
Yeah, I am sharing.
Oh, okay, you're good. Sorry, I have the wrong view.
Am I good? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So first, the colors and everything are actually really good. There's actually just some small tweaks I think you need to make. So one, on here the logo is I would make the logo larger. You want to demand that it is important. That's how you have to fake it before you make it. Before you make a household name brand, you got to make it look like a household name brand. And like I said, this one of the biggest mistakes is it's always small. It's larger here on the little packets. But if you look at the actual seasoning, then you made it really, really small. So I would actually make that color strip. It'll actually look better too, because it looks better on the bags than the little jars or the bottles. Sorry. I would make that larger. Have like a third of it, almost the logo. And then the rest of the design with the color treatment and how you have, the intricate designs and a strip below is actually really positive. I think what's breaking a little bit is that middle section because it almost looks like a farmer's market sticker stamp of like what information came in here. It almost looks like it's coming soon, but we haven't finished designing that portion, right? So one thing you could do is just have contrast between the two. So the flavor and the description of what is the flavor could add a little more hierarchy between the two. And I don't think they necessarily need a box because if you have this box shape, it is drawing attention directly to that, but it's also competing with the brand. So an example of this, you've actually kind of solution is if you look at the minis, for example, the minis branding looks really neat. How you wrote minis. That's how I would almost envision you did the honeyed heat, right? Or the flavor, like remove that box, have that in white. You can use colors. There's outlines. There's different tactics you can use so that it's still legible, but then it still has that uniqueness to it. And then you can have what what ingredients are in there a little bit smaller underneath it and keep that secondary because that they all shouldn't be competing against each other for attention. And then I am a little curious of like the no garlic, no onion. Is that for allergens or is that like a common thing that people want specifically? I'm just questioning like a little clarity on like the importance of that portion.
So it was important for me. That was the reason that we started it, because I have an intolerance against garlic and onions.
Okay.
It is probably it's a niche problem. So there are people who have IBS, and some of the people who, like 1 in 10 people have IBS. People who suffer from IBS may also have issues with garlic and onions. But one of the things that we do struggle with is when some people see that, they're like, oh, no garlic, no onions, but I love garlic. And then we have to like reel them back in because they've already discounted us. So I don't know.
And
That's
that's
something.
why I was asking. Yes. So you want to go to the common denominator. You want to attract, not push. So an example of this is if it was very common, let's say that it was gluten-free and it was vegan, then that's a big call out for a common denominator that you would want to put out and you would want to grab attention to. But something like this, it's a smaller niche. That's what grabbed my attention is one, I was asking like why, because like I'm not that person. And then two, is it that important? What I would do is if you think that's hurting sales, what I would do is actually just put that on the back. And you can put little icons. You can still put disclaimers to help people know instantly, hey, this doesn't have that, and that's fantastic, without putting it on the front as a deterrent. Because right now, what I think is happening is you're drawing too much attention to it. And then you might also deter people that might be in the larger wagon that might want that. Even though these spices might be amazing, you don't want to deter them because of that big, even there might be some confusion too. Like for me looking at it, I had a little confusion. So I was like, what other information could you put there in place of that?
Candice, would your products be low FODMAP?
Yes.
And I wonder, right, if you're going for a audience of low FODMAP kind of friendly foods, is that a language that people are looking specifically for, which is more of a positive language versus a no garlic, no onion language that would also get across that message and might appeal towards that demographic if that's something that you're interested in, essentially a line of low FODMAP seasoning blends versus seasoning blends that just happen to have no garlic or onion, which is Sanders mentioned raises more questions than answers, I think, for some people.
Actually,
And-
Candace, if there's a way, can you show them the back of the mini? Or if you guys can click on one, because there's actually, we have quite a bit of information.
Perfect.
Could you go scroll one over?
Yeah, that one.
Next. This one.
So we have this on every single one of our bottles and every single one of our minis. We have the flavor profile so people know kind of what the level of flavor they're going to be getting ahead of time. And then we have suggested food pairings. And within the back, we also have the little icons that show, we're kosher certified, that information.
Yeah, this is fantastic. And so this is really, really helpful. I love this. I don't think I've ever seen a food pairing, and I've seen the intensity rating and some of these flavor profiles before, but I've never seen where you actually paired it the way you did and organized it. And I think it's absolutely fantastic. I would either do transitional colors or change it a little more monochromatic as it gets a little busy. And on the back, this is also really large. I think from the size of it from a distance, the type font for those might be hard to read. So just little things like that to think about. But this is absolutely fantastic. I think the big thing is, the back information, having that is fantastic. I think this right here might be a little bit of a deterrent. So figure out how to reword that, similar to what Jordan said, or think of what selling points would attract them, because you want to go through that whole buying experience that I mentioned earlier is like grab, the peripheral selling, grab their attention. And then once they have it, you need to be able to close the deal from there. So put things that are going to attract them to pick it up or look at it online. And then when they click in, that background information will help increase the sales without having things that deter on the front, if that makes sense.
Is there something else you'd like to see on the front?
Yeah. So for example, you have like gluten-free, non-GMO, some of those. That might be good. Without solutioning it, what I would say is follow the process. So first you want to look at, reassess your target audience. in each target persona, meaning your hyper niche as well as like your common, like larger audience. Look at what the market's doing and then assess and figure out what the priority is. So for example, if your competitors were putting like vegan, gluten-free and stuff like that on the front, you either want to put something better or at least keep up with them, because if someone else has that and you don't, then you're not gonna be able to compete. So I don't want to give you the final solution. I would say one of these is probably good, but I would say follow that process and then determine the priorities based on the audience and the market. And then you'll have a simple formula. You'll know, it'll be very clear exactly what you should be putting to help compete with everybody else.
Okay.
So you do like the back. It's just the front, at least to the bottles and the minis, just kind of tweak, make our logo bigger, maybe remove that kind of stamp where it says honeyed heat as an example. Do you like the different wallpaper that we have? We call it wallpaper, where we have the bees and then the French citrus, we have the lemon.
I think that's actually really fun. You just have to leverage. So I think you have the right ingredients in the kitchen. It's just spicing it up a little bit and reformatting. So like you have everything there. It's just about calling more attention to the brand. Like have a little more, like maybe the third principle, or you do it fourths or in thirds, and have that sectioned off for like the branding, because that'll create really good contrast like you have here, the contrast between the two. The other thing too, sorry, I'm gonna click that. The other thing too is the bottom portion, going back to that again, is like you're also having these compete as like two equal ports. If you look at this, they just saying this information at the bottom is equally as important as your logo, but it's not. So we might not even need that section, and it might just be literally like if you cover this bottom portion up and you just had the contrast between the two, you'll actually have a higher contrast because right now you have it balanced. So play around with that. Play around with the type fonts, and add some of that contrast to your branding. You have these color strips, add that to this, right? There's a missing consistency between some of your branding on each of your materials. If you have this, let's just say this was adjusted, it was a third, and you had on each, you have a now recognizable brand. The problem is you don't have a recognizable brand because you have a brand that's similar but different, and then very different to this, right? The branding on this does not match this. And then if you go to your boxes, there's I think it's actually missing even the logo on the front, right?
No,
The
it's actually in the bottom left-hand
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, it's the bottom left.
Okay, so that's
Yeah,
even
it's
worse
covered up
because
in
now
weird-
now you're saying that, hey, this is on the bottom corner. It's not important. Don't look at the brand. That should be the top, and it should be very consistent across all mediums and grab more attention, and keep that colored strip on everything. Have this pantry collection look very consistent with your others, because then you're gonna build a cohesive experience. It's gonna be a really fun experience because you guys have something really cool here. We want to leverage that. We want to maximize it, not like piece it apart separately, if that makes sense.
Could I ask
love
one
the
last
idea.
question?
We are running
Yeah.
out of time for
Okay.
Candace and Anthony, but what I'd love to do, if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to Sanders to talk more, because there's probably lots, other questions you might have.
Mhm.
But I want to make sure we get through at least one more before our time's up.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
both for coming up. All right, so then the last one is Steph from Pasta Desserts. I'm gonna say chocolate ravioli.
Yes.
Yes, this one, I saw this and my initial response was, I'm going to order some and try it. This is so unique. I love it.
Thank you. One note, I don't know if you got this, but it is a frozen product. So we have to stand out on a frozen shelf behind a nice, frosted glass. So there's, just wanted to mention that.
Yes, that always makes it harder. I'm always, when I take
course.
photos, I have to open the windows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to ask?
But yeah, so Steph, what's working well, do you think, with your packaging, and any problems that you've encountered?
So I mean, there's a couple of minor changes I have to make. We're doing just-in-time ordering. So like we just did a run of 8,000. So the next run will probably be bigger, but I want to make some slight tweaks. I am WeBank certified, so I think that should be on the front. But that's some feedback I'd like to know. And then, I know there's such a big protein trend, and my designer was like, I don't want you to put protein on the front. And I was like, well, maybe we should, because there's high protein counts in, especially
How much?
peanut butter
How much
jelly.
protein?
Peanut butter and jelly has 9 grams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, enough that maybe I haven't put it on yet, though.
So let me ask you first, who's your target audience? Is it people that are somewhat health conscious, or is it more for dessert
Yeah, we're in.
flavor?
I
Like,
mean, it's a dessert, so it's definitely going to be folks that, you know, do eat sugar. It's not a high sugar content, but it is absolutely a dessert. So that's how we're branded, and that's where we sit on the shelf. And it's an all natural.
but it's only got only 4 grams of sugar?
Yeah, we don't put. There's no sugar in the dough on the outside, and the inside fillings are very low sugar. So they're not overly sweet and all natural. We're in the natural category. Yep.
Yeah, so you should be leveraging that. So first, just going off the information, you have 9 grams of protein. So I'm very health conscious to some extent. I try to eat healthy. Like when I was a kid, my mom, we weren't allowed to buy anything unless we showed the back label and we had to justify what those numbers were. She taught us how to read those really early on. And so this she actually would have approved because it was only 4 grams, so that's good. I would definitely put the 9 grams of protein, 4 grams. A few things that you have here that it's like the 4 G's and the milligrams are really small.
Yeah.
And some of that's a little actually hard to read, especially from a distance.
Yep.
And so you could definitely adjust that so that it's more legible.
Okay.
And I would definitely probably have the 9 grams of the macros in general. I would probably really emphasize because at first glance, no one in the planet is ever going to think this is healthy. Because you literally have the chocolate ravioli with cheesecake. So no one's going to think that unless you say it. And, you know, if you read the book, Build a Story Brand, they say that you have to state the obvious. You don't tell people what to do, they won't do it. If you don't tell people what it is, they won't know. So
Yep.
I would definitely call that out.
Okay.
The keep frozen and all natural ingredients totally competes. But they're probably going to they're going to probably know it needs to be keep frozen, but you can put that down here. It's secondary information. You can have secondary information that's still legible and still important, still readable, but it doesn't compete with the rest of the design. The all natural ingredients, that's a big selling point. It should not be competing with the keep frozen. It also should be separated. I would keep all natural ingredients close to those macros, right?
Yep.
You want to have that narrative. You don't want to just say, hey, all natural, keep frozen, here's the macros. You're kind of like, it's jumbling the narrative a little bit.
Okay.
The other thing too is you have these two that kind of compete.
Mhm.
So ready in under 5 minutes. That might be good. That might not be as high on the visual hierarchy as it might be needed. That's certified crafted, always made with love, ravioli. I think that might be more important, but I also might want to reword that to something different that speaks directly to the consumer. So always made with love. I think it's a really cool brand narrative, but I would put that brand narrative as secondary, as not primary. So there might be actually information like when you put 9 grams of protein, that actually might be the big call out, or my call out might be the sugar. This is a dessert that has 4 grams of sugar. I would probably jump in and probably say that the low sugar is probably a higher call out, right? So think about like that's where you're coming. You want to put what's going to help your overall sales, right? What's going to grab the attention the most? What's going to compete? If you have a dessert that's 4 grams of sugar in the frozen section, that alone is probably going to kill a lot of the competition.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing too is you could easily triple your sales by having a picture of cheesecake.
So if you look at the plated version, there's one right next to it. There's a strawberry cheesecake there. We did like a photo shoot with cheesecake. You think that?
Yeah, but what about the
I don't like
consumers?
people getting confused that I don't want them to think there's cheesecake, like an actual cheesecake in there, right?
So don't over solution too quickly, right? First, identify what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then solve the problem. So I can tell you right now that customers, when they're looking for flavor, they're looking for flavor, right? Tropicana removed the orange from the orange juice, and they lost $30 million and had to revert back.
Yeah.
So I can tell you right now from my experience that if you added cheesecake, you could probably triple your sales because people are looking and say, oh, that is a cheesecake flavor. They are enticed by what they see. If you have to mentally think about cheesecake, it's not as enticing as looking at cheesecake.
Okay.
So and if you're worried about that problem, don't worry about that. Identify what question you're trying to solve and then solution it. We can add cheesecake as secondary in the background. You're going to know it literally says chocolate ravioli. They're going to know that it's not the cheesecake, it's the ravioli. You can put that in the background. You can also put that in, some cherries or elements of the cheesecake. You can do it in certain colorways. Like right now, the packaging doesn't really say that it's cheesecake colored. I'm assuming that's because you wanted your branding to be synonymous with this color. Is that correct?
Yeah, and to stand out on the shelf, because everything else, if you like, typically were replaced. Most other items are light in color, like pops and other types of frozen cakes are all like very light, and so we wanted to stand out that way with our brand colors. The bottom section is supposed to be like a strawberry red, and then the peanut butter and jelly is like a brownish. That's what separates.
Did you have the other ones on here?
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly's on there.
Perfect. Yeah. So you have so there's a couple things here. I do like the consistency of your branding, and I get why. Sorry, I'm trying to hover without hovering.
Yeah.
So you do have like the blue, which is consistent, and you're using, a color. You're becoming synonymous with that color, which is one tactic that some people use. I think it's a good tactic. The only thing is now you're fighting against tastiness, right? Because that color might not say that it's tasty, although it might say it's artisanal, it's a premium. And so you have to combat that with having an image of maybe what the flavor is, and that can help. The other thing too is your blue is a little bit dark, and so you want to have sure that you have contrast between the two. So it could just be my screen, but I would say the peanut butter one, you lose a little bit of the contrast between the top and the bottom. So maybe brighten that a little bit. In the strawberry flavor, maybe saturate a little bit. I would have to see, but you're also kind of looking more premium, so they might be okay. The overall visual hierarchy is actually pretty good. I think you just need to change some of your information. I would definitely add some of the flavor elements in the back. The large boxes, you focus.
We're not doing those anymore. Those I need to take them down. So we haven't developed new flavors yet. We're gonna change the fig and the peppermint to something more Italian.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say to have it consistent. So if you have that wave design and that contrast built into your small packaging, I would try to have that in the large packaging as well, just to have that consistent brand experience that they'll be consistent with. Because like this one does look very premium, this large box, but at the same time, it can also start to look almost generic versus like that unique experience that you've created with the smaller ones. Let's carry that funness to the larger ones, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
I do love that you put 12 delicious raviolis. So that's something that people overlook is descriptions. Steve Jobs was really smart. When he described everything, he made sure there was an adjective before the name on everything. And you did the same thing. Like if you don't tell them it's delicious, sometimes they don't know. So I love it. I love that you did that, and I think that's something that a lot of people can take away from that as well. The other thing too is this is non-GMO. You don't say that anywhere on here.
We're not certified yet. Yeah. We have a certification. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. But even if you're not certified, if the ingredients are non-GMO, you could still do it without certification. Kind of like when if you have a product that is still vegan, there's a difference between stating that it's certified vegan or it's vegan. You could still say it's non-GMO versus certified non-GMO because they're going to check the ingredients themselves, whether you have the official. It's kind of like if it's gluten-free versus certified gluten-free. Those are two different things, but don't miss out on the marketing for that, right?
Okay.
Steph, are you on retailers that require the certification? Because I know some retailers do.
That's true.
I mean, some retailers do. We're in about 200 stores, so we haven't really made our way into like Whole Foods quite yet. But we're gonna work on the non-GMO project, verification this year. But yeah, I just haven't done certs yet.
Awesome.
Yeah, because you're right. That would probably be pretty huge.
Steph, thanks so much for
Yeah.
sharing and coming up.
Thank you.
And Sanders,
Yeah.
thanks so much for all your review and doing the presentation, the overview, and doing some knowledge for the brands. I mean, they didn't make it through everyone who joined, but if you're interested in having your packaging reviewed as well, you can go to nuexcreative.com/bootbetty and book a time with Sanders. Sanders, thanks so much for being on and sharing your expert advice. Super helpful. And I always love when we can give back directly to our founders. So thanks so much for everyone who has joined today. We have a couple upcoming webinars as well. So make sure to check out those and register on bootbetty.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.